Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Namaste. Hare Krishna. Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Hare Krishna Tushta Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavad Pranam.
Hare Krishna Sukumala Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Begin. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya
Radha
Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha
Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana
Natira Vanachariya
Natira Vanachari
Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha
Madhava
Kunja
Bihari.
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna Krishna
Krishna
Krishna
Hare
Hare Hare
Hare
Hare Rama
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 Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna
Hare Krishna
Krishna Krishna
Krishna
Hare
Hare Hare
Hare
Hare
Rama
Rama Rama
Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna
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 Krishna Krishna Hare Hare
Hare
Hare Rama Rama
Rama
Rama Rama Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Hare
Hare
Krishna
Krishna Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Jaya Radha Giridhari Radha Giridhari Radhe.
Jaya Radha Giridhari Radha Giridhari Radhe
Jaya Jagannath Jaya Jagannath Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhadra Jaya
Jagannath Jaya Jagannath Jaya Baladev Jaya Subhadra
Gaurnitai Jaya Gaurnitai Jaya Gaurnitai Jaya Gaurnitai Jaya
Jaya Gaurnitai 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 Jaya Gaurnitai
Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada
Prabhupada
Prabhupada Jaya
Prabhupada Jaya
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 Prabhupada
Prabhupada
Jaya Gurudev 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev
Jaya Jaya Gurudev 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev
जय विष्णुपाद परम बड़ी व्रजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शतश्री ऐसी भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय
Jai
अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय रामाचार्य श्रीदास ठाकुर की जय प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर वृंद की जय
जय
श्याम सुंदर की जय श्री श्री राधा गिरिधारी भगवान की जय
जय
सुभद्रा मैया की जय श्री श्री गौर
जय
की जय
जय
All glory to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna.
Hare
हरे
Krishna
All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna.
हरे
All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna.
Hare
हरे
Praise all glories to the lotus feet of Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय
Vasudevaya
Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om
ओम
Namo
नमो
Bhagavate
Vasudevaya
Vasudevaya.
Om
Om
Namo
Namo
Bhagavate
Vasudevaya
Narayanam
Namaskritam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam
Dhiraye
Shastreshu Nitam
Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate
Bhagavate Bhagavate
Bhagavatam Puranam
Paramhamsyam Jnanam Param Paromidiyate
Jnana Viraga Bhakti Sahitam Naishkarmam Tatshritvam
विचारणं करो
Srimad Bhagavatam ki Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
ओम नमो
Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Jayato Anvayaditaratas Chare Abhinyaswara
Brahmavadidayadi kavoye Mayanti jasra Devari Mridanga Vinaya Jatati Charvasha
Amna Svena Sadani
Sadirasya
Bhakam
Bhakam Satyapuram धीमहि
सत्यं
सत्यां परं धीमहि सत्यां परं धीमहि वेदं वस्तुमन्त्रमस्तु सर्वदा तात्रयोऽनुदाम् श्रीमद्भागवते
Hare Krishna.
So where were we? I think we were at the last. We were to do the last verse.
44.
Chapter 3.
Yes.
Okay. Did we have any homework, Reti Mataji?
Nah.
No?
No homework.
Okay. We did homework this time then. Okay. So yeah, maybe let's recite 44. Tatra kirtayato vipra viprarshir bhurite jasaha aham chadhyagamam tatra niveshtastat anugraha soaham va shravayishyami yatha
O learned Brahmanas, when Shukdev Goswami recited Bhagavatam there in the presence of Emperor Parikshit, I heard him with rapt attention, and thus, by his mercy, I learned the Bhagavatam from that great and powerful sage. Now, I shall try to make you hear the very same thing as I learned it from him and as I have realized it.
Prabhu, you want to read the first sentence of the purport as well, please?
One can suddenly see directly the presence of Lord Sri Krishna in the pages of Bhagavatam if one has heard it from a self-realized great soul like Shukdev Goswami.
Yes.
That is the parampara.
Yes. So we all know how this chapter, we started off this chapter. This chapter is called the Krishna is the source of all incarnations. Correct. So in this chapter, some of the questions that were raised in chapter 1 are being answered, right?
Yes.
The pastimes, adventures that Krishna performed in various pastimes, various incarnations he took, all those questions were being answered. And the conclusion of this chapter is what? The most important incarnation of Krishna, which we discussed last time. And the most important is the literary incarnation of Krishna in the form of Srimad
Bhagavatam.
Last few verses, it touched upon the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam. How Srimad Bhagavatam is not just that incarnation of Krishna, but how it actually benefits all of us in all respects, especially in terms of spiritual advancement. So then in 44, so in 43 was an important verse. It's a memory verse where
Krishna
last question of the 6 questions were being answered. Where did Krishna go? And what did he leave behind? So Krishna actually went, but he didn't go. It's like Krishna is present in Vrindavan all the time. But after a certain age, he went to Mathura. Right? So it's very inconceivable for people who don't understand the science of Krishna, that how can he simultaneously be there and not there? So in the so-called vision of the Vrindavan Vasis, he was in Mathura. But actually Krishna resides in Vrindavan eternally. Right? So, similarly, Krishna, he in his original transcendental form as he appeared in front of the people at that point of time when he was traveling on earth, that particular form of Krishna left. But Krishna is always present. And more so, he's present in the form of Srimad Bhagavatam now. And he will continue to be so, be present in that form. So that was established in 43. And 44 now slowly traces, it will start tracing the history of this narration. And how Sukadev Goswami narrated it, and Suta Goswami is saying how he heard it. Just like somebody asks us some question, or they ask some information about Krishna consciousness, and we answer. So we should always remember that whenever we speak anything about Krishna consciousness, whether it is a formal class or we have a question answer session or anything, we always remember our Guru. So that's why before we start, we always pay our obeisances to Guru, to Parampara. And as a matter of doing Kirtan, we finish Kirtan with praising the deities, and we praise Prabhupada and Guru. And that covers the whole Parampara. So we always have to be grateful to the Parampara. We should always beg mercy and blessings from the Parampara before we can attempt to speak something about the signs of Krishna. Only fortunate people get this opportunity. So here, Suta Goswami is saying that when Sukadev Goswami recited Bhagavatam, what did he do? He heard him with
Rapt attention.
Rapt attention means
One-pointed attention.
Focus.
Very focused.
Focus. No multitasking. Focus. So he was sitting there, and all he was doing is just hearing with full attention. So endeavor was by who? Suta Goswami. Endeavor for what? Endeavor to receive Bhagavatam. So first endeavor has to be there. We have to endeavor to listen with full attention. That is the first qualification. And then what happened? He says, thus by his mercy. Whose mercy?
Sukadev Goswami's. Sukadev Goswami's mercy.
Sukadev Goswami.
Yes.
So Suta Goswami endeavored to listen with rapt attention from Sukadev Goswami. But by Sukadev Goswami's mercy, what happened? Suta Goswami said, I learned the Bhagavatam from that great and powerful sage. So here, Suta Goswami is being glorified by all the sages, right? When somebody asks us to talk about Krishna or makes us give a class, the person who is invited to give the class or is made to sit on Vyasasana, it is etiquette to glorify that person. In that when we are sitting there, when we are talking about Krishna, if we receive all the glorification that people are showering on us for ourselves, then it is a very difficult situation. It's a dangerous situation. So we should accept the glorification and pass it on to our Guru. Prabhupada says, even when somebody, like as we go out and meet people and do programs, people try and touch our feet, right? Now, we don't normally allow that, especially if it's an elderly person. But if somebody is insistent, then what do? You can't offend that person. But we don't take the pranam ourselves. So when somebody is doing pranam, we fold our hands and we remember our Guru and we pass on that pranam through us to the Guru. So we don't take. We are not, capable. We don't have that qualification. So we pass on. So this verse says how we should qualify ourselves with our endeavor to hear with rapt attention. And then the mercy automatically will flow. Then he says, now I shall try to make you hear the very same thing that I learned from him and I have
Realized.
So this is the big difference. This last line you have to note. So when he heard Bhagavatam, he heard Bhagavatam with attention. Correct? So when he heard, he had to understand it and learn it. Not learning does not mean learning the verses only. Learning means learning the philosophy, learning the subject matter. So that is the second step. First is we hear, second is we understand, and third and most importantly, the last part is what? As I have
Realized.
yathamati. As I have realized it. So the realization has to come. We understand it, but the realization has to come. Right? And when will the realization come? As we have, we heard last time. And in fact, in the first verse of the next chapter, we will discuss more about that word realization. So I'll not talk about it now when we go there. But this realization is very important. When realization happens, then it motivates us to hear more, to hear with more attention. So if our hearing is not attentive, that means you have to understand that we are not sincerely following the process. That's why we don't get the taste to hear. We don't have the, when we say taste, doesn't mean that, like sometimes it's a bit ambiguous. So we should be eager to hear. If the eagerness to hear is not there, that means somewhere our devotional service is lacking. It is a symptom for us to understand whether we are on the right path or not. So in this verse, in fact, what we could do is, in this verse, nicely, Prabhupada describes from hearing to realization, what is the process? Like there are many things that happen. This is a simplified we heard. Hear, understand and realize. But in the purport, especially the last about 8-10 sentences, Prabhupada writes that.
Yes.
Yeah, one should hear it.
Yeah. So what is that? How many of us are here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We could maybe do, let's see.
11, Prabhu.
Sorry?
11,
Yeah,
including you.
10.
10, yes, that includes me. Because in Zoom there is an opportunity to do group
Breakup room.
breakout rooms. I've got that, but I've not tried it. Should we try? Let's see.
Yes.
Okay,
and
so
we will
let's
learn
try
that
this.
too.
So we'll do 5, 5 and 4. We'll have to control this. So 5 and 4. So I'll put 5 of you in one room and 4 of you in one room. Okay.
We are 10.
The total 10. Okay, 5 and 5. Great. So the exercise is that whoever is in that room, you take turns and you have to map out the process from hearing to realization. Just a map. And of course, you can discuss in terms of, how it flows and maybe some of your realizations. But essentially the map from hearing to realization. Right? So, so that exercise we'll do, and we'll just have maybe 5 minutes. That should be sufficient. I mean, it's very simple. You would already read it. Okay, let me try this. Okay, 2 breakout rooms. Okay, can you see the invitation to join the rooms?
Yes, please.
Yes, Prabhu. The moment we join, we will be lost. Okay?
Yeah, you'll be lost, but then you will come back again. Only thing
Yeah,
is,
we'll pick up.
I've not, I don't think I've given the time. So maybe you just stop that and you can come back. As soon as you stop, it will come back to the main screen. Okay. Back?
Yeah.
Back.
So, how was the experience? Smaller
Good.
Nice.
Good.
Good. Small groups.
We need to learn that breaking room, Prabhuji, at the end of the session.
Okay, good. I can guide in that also.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, it was good. And you can break it into any number. Like you can assign 2 people, 5 people, as many as you want. So it's good to have some small group activities, breaking up a big session. So it's good. Okay, so we had 2 groups. Maybe one person from each group can just share their flow chart. Group.
Yes, can I start from our group?
Okay, Sita Nandini Mataji, you are group 1?
Yeah, not 2. Sorry, one group will be first here. First group will be first.
Group first group? Who was in the first group?
Kadam Karan Prabhu will tell us on here.
Kadam Karan Prabhu, okay.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. So
You can put your video on, Prabhu. Let's
Yeah.
see.
okay.
Can we have the video on, please?
Videos on, please. Only 10 of us.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
So it sounds like from Srila Prabhupada's purport, he says, so one has to be pure in eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating. Then one can be pure in action. And then if one is pure in action, he can be pure in mind. If he's pure in mind, then he can give rapt attention and rapt attention to hearing Srimad Bhagavatam from the representative of Sukadeva Goswami. And then from there, he can get realization. Was that the last point that we were trying to get?
Yeah, so that's
And-
yes, Prabhu.
Yeah. But then the last line of the purport, Srila Prabhupada seems to bypass all of that. And he says, but somehow either from hearing with rapt the pure devotee at the very beginning, then we can bypass all these steps. And Shama was here and she was just thinking about how the initial followers who came to Srila Prabhupada, they were not following any regulative principles. But just by hearing from Srila Prabhupada, they jumped. They're able to do all of the other things. Yeah.
Yeah, very
So-
good point. Good observation. Yes. Yeah, no, thanks for that.
Anyone else from our group would like to just add on?
And
Madhuma?
also Nivishta. So when they are pure attention, realize the text with a pure attention, the word Nivishta means Sutta Goswami drank the juice of Bhagavatam through his ears. So is that a part of flow chart?
Yeah, you can always add that. So Nivishta basically he's drinking through his ears, which basically means he is hearing with rapt attention.
Attention, yeah.
Yeah, that's a rapt attention. It happens with the rapt attention, and there was, I think Prabhuji covered all of it.
Okay, great. Thank you. So
Thank
anybody
you.
from group 2?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah, from Srila Prabhupada purport, we have just arrange the points. First is we have to listen from the disciplic succession and bona fide person and who is the pure devotee. And number 2, we have to listen very carefully with rapt attention. Just Mataji told Nivishta. And when we will listen attentively, then our mind will be pure. Number 3 is pure in mind. So when our mind is pure, so our action will be pure, number 4 point. And when our action is pure, our action will be pure by following the 4 regulative principles. And then we can see the Lord Krishna in our Bhagavatam page.
Anybody else wants to add to anything? I think it's pretty much covered. So essentially, as you rightly said, it's not just the 4 regulative principles, the primary activities of any living entity. Right? So if you are a living entity, which we all are, they have these 4 activities. But the point is, except human beings, no other living entity has the ability to purify those 4 basic activities. They are on default mode. They just do it. But only human beings have the ability to purify those actions. And because they can purify the actions, it will ensure that because all their actions are pure, naturally the mind also eventually will become pure. Sometimes people do the other way. They say, oh, when my mind becomes very stable, then I'll be able to do this. Correct? People say that all the time, right? So we have to remind them and ourselves that, boss, you can't control the mind. Arjun didn't control. Forget controlling the mind. Yes, you can control the actions. So we control the actions, we redirect the actions so that eventually by doing those activities, there is some purification. When activities are purified, the mind becomes purified. When the mind becomes purified, what is the secret, or what is the symptom that the mind is purified? How do you know the mind is purified?
Eager to hear. When
Yes, that is definitely one big symptom. But if we go a bit deeper, from a slightly theoretical perspective,
self-realization,
you get satsang, and
so
you can.
Mind is always having ego problems with somebody. Our mind is having an ego problem with somebody who is belonging to us only, with his boss, mind's boss.
Intelligence.
No.
Intelligence.
Buddhi.
Intelligence. Is it not? The mind always have ego problems with intelligence. Always. Just like we have ego problems with other living entities. So how do you know that the mind is purified? I mean, is getting purified. It's not fully purified, but it's getting purified. When the mind voluntarily wants to listen to your intelligence, not somebody else's intelligence, to your intelligence. Right? So the mind says, oh, let me get up in the morning. Let me read Bhagavatam. Because the intelligence told me that day, and actually it made sense to me now. Right? So that's what is called purity of mind. When the mind is pure, it listens to the intelligence which tells him, hear with rapt attention. Nivishta. In fact, Mataji pointed out that thing Prabhupada writes, that whole sentence actually is very important. Nivishtas tad anugrahat. All the 3 words. Nivishtas tad anugrahat. So Nivishta is what? It is very, very attentive.
Perfectly attentive.
Yes. And tad anugraha. Anugraha means
by the mercy.
Yeah, just like in Damodar Lila we heard. There are 2 fingers short, right? One finger was endeavor, second finger was mercy. Yeah. Same thing is here. It's the same thing. So first is endeavor to hear, and second is mercy. So yes, so that's it. So that leads us to rapt attention. And when we hear with rapt attention, what is the result? How do we know that we are hearing with rapt attention? We will know it when we will realize the presence of Krishna in every page, not only every page, in every word of Srimad Bhagavatam, because that is not different from Krishna. And because we realize Krishna in every page and every word, we experience the bliss that is coming from Krishna. So it is not that we read and we become happy like we read a novel or watch a movie. Okay, that's our endeavor in watching and being happy, or reading and being happy. But here it is a bliss. Why? Bliss is coming from Krishna, who is present in the presence of pages of Bhagavatam. But a normal person who is not following the process will not realize it. The difference between a devotee and an ordinary non-devotional person is a devotee realizes. Because he realizes and hears, he experiences the bliss. It is a very practical thing. It is not just some theory that Krishna is sitting somewhere in Bhagavatam and we have to read the thing to discover him. No. You open Bhagavatam, that's Krishna's there. But we have to have that purity to perceive that, to realize that. And that's exactly what Prabhupada is trying to emphasize. And it's so nice that in this initial chapters, Prabhupada is laying the foundation, how to hear Bhagavatam. Otherwise, we'll just read it like an ordinary book. And after finishing Bhagavatam, if we can, or if we are able to, we'll think, oh, I forgot 90% of it anyway. And forget Krishna, I didn't even catch anything. So Prabhupada is warning here, we have to hear with rapt attention from the right source. That is also important. Right?
Prabhuji,
yes.
Can I don't know, I'm reading and I'm just getting, Sukadeva Goswami heard from his father.
Yes.
And then in this line, it says, which is the, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, I think 10th line. Sukadeva Goswami is a bona fide representative of Sukadeva Goswami because he wants to present the message which he received from the great learned Brahmana. What does that mean?
So learned Brahmana is Sukadeva Goswami.
Sukadeva Goswami, yeah.
Is it Sukdev only? Sukdev Goswami?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sukadeva Goswami heard from him, right?
So yeah, Sutta Goswami heard from Sukdev Goswami. Sukdev Goswami heard from his father. That's a parampara.
Correct.
But learned Brahmana is mentioned. Means it is a name for the Sukdev Goswami, is it?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And that was also a nice point Kadam Kanan Prabhu mentioned, is if we are hearing with rapt attention from a realized soul in parampara, then we don't have to worry about purifying other things, because by following that person's instruction and hearing him with rapt attention, automatically our actions are purified.
Yeah.
We don't have to make an extra endeavor. And that is the purport of that last sentence that Prabhupada concludes. Right. So just like we are not interested in following the regulative principles because we should follow the principles, but we are interested in following the instructions of Guru and Krishna. That is more important for us. Not that we should not do these things. For us, it is that we should please Krishna. To please Krishna, if I have to do many more things, it's okay. So here, to hear is more important, and whatever he hears, I do. Now, whether it is this activity or that activity, for me, that is secondary. You see that? So both are doing it, but the motivation is different. One is trying to only purify if they are following the rituals, but the other person is trying to make spiritual progress by pleasing higher authority. As a result of pleasing, he's doing those things anyway. So that's the purport in terms of following the right authority.
Somehow.
Okay, so that concludes chapter 3. Jai. We'll move on to chapter 4, which is the appearance of Narada. Okay, let's recite this verse. So this essentially, okay, let's just do a quick summary of the chapter. So for those of you who have read the study notes, so this chapter is divided into 4 sections. Right? 4 sections. The first section is 1 to 13. So 1 to 13 essentially is another section that is dealing about different questions. Right? So Shaunak Rishi is asking some questions. Again, to start that conversation. And then from 14 to 25 talks about how Vyasadeva, he compiled the Vedic literatures, specifically how he divided the Vedas, that component. Right. And then 26 to 31, the third section, talks about how Vyasadeva, after he compiled so many things so nicely, very intricately, he was still
unhappy.
And the last 2 verses in this chapter is the appearance of Narada. Okay, 4 sections. Okay, so we'll start with text 1. Vyasa Vacha Iti bruvanam samstuya muninam devasatrinam Vriddha kulapati sutam bhavricha shaunako
Brahvi. On
On
hearing,
hearing,
okay, go Mataji.
go ahead, Mataji.
You go. I'll take next one.
On hearing Sutta Goswami speak thus, Shunaka Muni, who was the elderly learned leader of all rishis, engaged in that prolonged sacrificial ceremony, congratulated Sutta Goswami by addressing him as follows.
This is also a very, very nice purport. Two important aspects are being emphasized. So first, Prabhupada writes, in a meeting of learned men, when there are congratulations or addresses for the speaker, the qualification of the congratulator should be as follows, right? So when there is a sabha, there is a meeting, there is an association of devotees, the person who addresses, or in common terms we say MC, has to have certain qualification. Randomly somebody cannot just stand up and do that. That's also etiquette. And even if somebody wants to do that, they should be waiting till they are asked to do by a senior devotee. So we should not do anything independently unless we are guided or encouraged by a senior devotee. That's something very important. There is I just remember talking about sabha and talking. When it's interesting, Prabhupada said in a meeting of learned men. Because in meetings, we always meet. And most of the meetings that we like to go to are social meetings. Where we can talk all kinds of things from the heart and all kinds of, unnecessary things, nonsensical things. Just to spend time. Prajalpa, exactly. So we like that. So because we like Prajalpa, we like to go to such social occasions. But where there is some beneficial subject matter to be discussed or heard, we think twice, maybe 3 times. And we give so many excuses not to. So in Hindi, there is a proverb, Maharaj says that sadhu se sadhu mile, hue do baat. साधु से साधु मिले हुए दो बात, गधे से गधे मिले हुए दो लात. Right? For those of you who didn't get the Hindi, so it is said that sadhu se sadhu mile. So when a learned person meets another learned person, they talk about nice things, beneficial things. Do do baat. But when one donkey meets another donkey, what happens? They only kick each other. Right? And in all these so-called social gatherings, that's what we see. People, they are like donkeys dressed up very nicely, trying to portray each other very nicely, very sophisticated. But what are they doing? They are just trying to backbite each other and put each other down. And they're just kicking each other. So whenever this assembly of learned men comes in, that Bhagavatam comes to my mind. I'll share that. Okay. So then Prabhupada says, what are the qualifications of the congratulator? What is it? So he says that he must be the first thing.
Learned man. Elderly.
He must be the leader of the house and elderly man.
Elderly person.
Yes. He must be vastly learned also. So 3 qualities. Vriddha. If you look at the verse, Vriddha. Vriddha means, in
aged person.
So it's not necessarily somebody who has gray hair, but somebody who is elderly, like elderly in terms of age.
Yeah.
So if there is a assembly of youth, they should not think that, oh, who will congratulate, because all are youth. There is no gray-haired person, so we cannot do it. Okay, not like that. But in that group, the person, whoever is most, is the most senior in terms of age, that person should take up that responsibility, or that is his responsibility. So it is Vriddha. Second is Kulapati.
Kulapati.
Kul ke pati. So Kulpati not necessarily meaning, Kulpati, as we say, is the traditional, family tradition. In the family, whoever is the head. So in that family of people who have got together, that's also a family. Whoever is the head of that family, senior. And the third one is Bhavrichaha. So just by being senior does not give you automatic status. You also have to be knowledgeable. You have to have
learned
experience. Like even in the material world, an experienced person is always sought after. So because he has something to give. He has got that experience, and he can use his experience to do good to others, to the company, to people around him, to his customers, whatever it is. So these three things are very important. He has to be the leader. He has to have leadership qualities, basically, Kulapati. He has to be elderly, and he has to be learned. Three things. And also we have to be very careful. Sometimes there are other considerations in terms of seniority and respect. So in under Vaishnava etiquettes, it is clearly mentioned that we should be very careful in how we award respect to others. And there are 5 points that are mentioned. Based on these 5 points, we have to give them respect. Anybody knows? There are five points. So you have to qualify for all 5 or majority of the 5. So that person will be given the highest status or the highest respect in terms of seniority. So maybe let's do it as a homework.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So you have to find out the 5 factors that determine the seniority of a devotee. So this is part of the Vaishnava etiquette. I've given you a big hint where to find. Okay, so we'll do it. We'll take that next time. So this is very important. And on a very practical level, we should be very aware of these points moving ahead. So that is the first point Prabhupada makes. And then he talks about what actually is realization. Beautifully is explained here. So Prabhupada writes that personal realization does not mean one should, out of vanity, attempt to show one's own learning by trying to surpass the previous acharya. Because this is exactly what one needs to do to get a PhD. If you want a PhD, you have to surpass the previous acharya. And you have to prove that you have surpassed, then you are awarded PhD. I don't know if anybody has pursued masters or wanted to do PhD or not. Did you? No. Yeah. I inquired. I didn't bother, but I had inquired. And
yeah, I did inquire and then gave up.
Yes. But for masters also, you had to do research, Prabhuji, and you had to surpass. So the masters.
Yeah,
yes.
So
dissertation, you have to do your own. Yeah.
Correct.
So we all have done that dissertation.
Yeah, I have done as well.
Yeah, we all have done.
So we know then that in the current educational world, you have to surpass the previous acharya. Otherwise, you will not get your degree.
PhD.
Right? PhD or master's, whatever it is. So here Prabhupada writes that, but in terms of spiritual knowledge, transcendental knowledge, we have to always remain under the shelter under the blessings of previous Acharya. Never try to surpass them by saying something that you feel has come to you directly, bypassing the previous Acharyas. For us, even understanding the mood of the previous Acharya is a big thing. What to talk about getting new realizations? We are so impure, there is no way we can get new realization. We don't even get normal, ordinary realization. What to talk about new realization? So this is the first part. Second part, he must have full confidence in the previous Acharya, and at the same time, he must realize the subject matter so nicely that he can present the matter for the particular circumstances in a suitable manner. Very important. Actually, this whole section is beautiful. So first is, we should not try to get some different meaning and surpass the Acharya. That is number one. Number two, we must have full confidence, means full faith that whatever the Acharyas have written is perfect. I might not understand it perfectly or fully, but what the Acharya has mentioned is perfect. Let me try to understand. That is the mood. And at the same time, we must try to realize the matter by studying, by assimilating, by experiencing. So this transcendental knowledge is actually in today's outside world, it is called experiential learning. So you have to experience it. It is said that when you hear, you only learn a little bit. I'm talking about the world outside. When you hear and see visual, you learn a bit more, right? Then when you hear, you see, and you experience something, you learn a lot more in the same time. But when you hear, you see, you feel, you touch and feel, and you actually experience, then you learn maximum. So it is called experiential learning. But transcendental knowledge, by hearing, we are actually inculcating experiential learning, because by hearing, there is a process that happens, which gives us experience, which gives us realization. Not just in hearing and going into the heart and giving a sudden realization. What is happening? We are getting this knowledge, right? We are getting this knowledge. With that knowledge, we are trying to react to the world around us, to the people around us, to the situation around us, right? Good situation, bad situation, this problem, that problem. We are trying to use that knowledge, the transcendental knowledge, and implement it. True or no? We may not be fully successful. That is okay. But at least we are aware of that knowledge and we are trying to use it to the best of our ability. When we use that knowledge, what happens? We react accordingly. When we react accordingly, we understand the results of that reaction. And that gives us, or because of that reaction that we get as a result of those actions we have taken based on Shastra, under guidance, we get some reciprocation. And that reciprocation enriches our experience. It becomes an experience for us. Hey, this works. See, I didn't do this. Krishna says, my guru had said to do, I didn't do it. See, I got into trouble. Or see, this was such a horrible, miserable situation, but somehow my guru told me, or my senior godbrother told me, I should just persevere and move ahead. It will be fine. And yes, it became fine. Don't we have these experiences in our life?
Very correct.
Yeah, we have this, right? So what is this? We think, oh, I just reacted. No. In the subconscious, this transcendental knowledge is there. That's why we have to study regularly. We have to chant for purification. This knowledge is there. So when we are faced with these situations, we try and react based on that information. And when we react with that information, we get the results of that. And that forms our experience. And with that experience, it helps us realize what is mentioned in Shastra is correct for my benefit. The more I follow it, the more I can deal with the problems of this world in a better way. Is it not?
Yes, Prabhu, yes.
Yeah, that's it. So this is, it is, see, experiential is not something from some top, somebody will come and, there'll be a glow behind us. That's a common perception sometimes people have who are not in this path. It is nothing like that. It is something very practical. So that experience that we get gives us that realization. So this knowledge, it is said here that we have to realize the subject matter so nicely by applying it in our day-to-day life that we can present this matter, this subject matter, this topic, this transcendental science to a particular time, place, circumstances. We should be able to present this knowledge as per time, place, circumstance. And the more we are able to present, the more we are able to discuss this subject matter, our own understanding becomes more pakka.
Deeper, yeah.
True or no? I mean, all of you are doing Bhakti Vriksha or Read and Relish or some form of preaching, whether regularly or not regularly, doesn't matter. But you are sharing this knowledge that you have gained from Srila Prabhupada, from your Guru Maharaj. So the more you share, what happens? The more you teach, the more you share, the more your knowledge becomes deep.
Yes.
Because your reading becomes deep. Your understanding becomes deep. And then when it becomes deeper, your realizations also become deeper. Right? So here Prabhupada then writes that how you should present. The original purpose of the text must be maintained.
Mm.
So we should not put our meaning in that. I think Prabhupada meant like that. No, as soon as we start saying I think means problem, big problem.
Sure.
We think, I think, you think, it doesn't matter what, it is not important. What is important is how Prabhupada thinks, how our Guru Maharaj thinks, how Parampara thinks. That is important because we are not here for what you think and I think. So what they think, we have to apply in our lives because they have realized they are scientists. In materially we say NASA scientist. Oh, big NASA scientist. He's like next to God only. Such intelligent person. Our parampara consists of what? They are super duper scientists.
Yeah.
Krishna on the top.
Scientist.
Top scientist.
They're top intellects of not only their times, of eternally. So if we try and understand their realization or their explanation, that is sufficient for us. So no obscure meaning should be skewed out of it. Yet it should be presented in a manner, in an interesting manner for the understanding of the audience. This is called
Realization.
Right? So there are 4 points. Realization means it has 4 things, 4 components, and we should always keep that in mind. So when we study, when we read every day, we should always keep those aspects, these 4 aspects in mind. So just as a summary, first, we should not try to show our own learning by surpassing any acharya. In fact, we should have full confidence in the acharya and at the same time present it suitably. Then the original purpose of the text must be maintained. Number 3. And number 4, no obscure meaning should be skewed out, but it should be presented interestingly to the audience. So it should not be diluted. At the same time, it should be presented in an interesting way based on the audience. So that's why when we give a class or do read and relish, when we start, we first engage with the audience. We ask a few questions to understand what is the level of understanding, level of knowledge the audience has. And then we we tailor make that information, the transcendental knowledge, to suit, so that they are able to accept it and understand it nicely. So these four components make up what we call realization. So this, from that perspective, this verse was very, very important. Is that clear? Any questions on that?
Prabhu, can you repeat this again, please? That four components.
Yeah. So first part is
not to surpass the.
One should not attempt
don't
to
show your
one's
own learning
by surpassing the previous acharya. That's number one. Number two,
confidence.
you should have confidence in previous acharya, and at the same time realize the subject matter nicely to present it appropriately. Then number three, the original purpose of the text must be maintained. And number four, no obscure meaning must be stripped out, yet it should be presented in an interesting manner for the audience. Clear?
Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay, so that is called realization. Okay, so we'll move on to 2. Shaunaka uvacha Suta Suta Mahabhaga Vadano Vadunam Vadham Bhagavati Punyam Yadaha Bhagavanukaha.
Saunaka said, O Sut Goswami, you are the most fortunate and respected of all those who can speak and recite. Please relate the pious message of Srimad Bhagavatam, which was spoken by the great and powerful sage Sukdev Goswami.
Here Prabhupada writes in the first sentence in the purport that Suta Goswami is twice addressed by Suta Goswami. If you notice, the verse starts out, Suta Suta. So Prabhupada says sometimes when we are very excited and eager, we repeat that word.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, just like you said that. Oh, Prabhu, can you please do that?
Yes.
If you consciously think, if you are repeating a word, not that we are deliberately doing it, but we are so excited, it's repeating itself. So here the same thing, Suta Suta Mahabhaga. So Prabhupada writes, Suta Goswami is twice addressed herein by Shaunak Goswami out of great joy. He feels so joyful, so blissful that he has an opportunity to hear Bhagavatam from Suta Goswami. So what does this indicate? This indicates the eagerness. The eagerness to hear. So we can only hear with rapt attention if there is eagerness, na?
Yes.
It will not happen that we start hearing and then we tell ourselves, hey, come on, now listen attentively. It's never going to happen. But if their eagerness is there, that whatever it is, I am busy, I have got this to do, that to do, but I have to hear. That's it. I'm so fortunate, I've got this opportunity, I must hear. So if that eagerness is there, automatically it will translate to rapt attention. And that eagerness is developed by, as we discussed in that purport that we did, is all the purification of the actions, mind, and ultimately mind listening to the intelligence to hear or to develop that eagerness. And here Prabhupada writes that why were they happy to hear it from Suta Goswami? Because they knew he is the bona fide. There are many people who are maybe there to recite Bhagavatam. But we have to discriminate and hear Bhagavatam from that person, bona fide person, who is an authorized representative. And finding Suta Goswami to be one such, that devotee, they felt great joy. So similarly, when we come across devotees who are disciples of Prabhupada, we feel so nice. Imagine when we used to hear Giriraj Maharaj in the online classes, then Malati Mataji, all these great personalities that they are disciples of Prabhupada, and they were narrating to us about Prabhupada, how joyful we feel.
Yeah.
So nice. We tell each other, oh, today Giriraj Maharaj is giving the class. We should listen. So that's exactly how these sages here are feeling. Okay, and then Prabhupada talks about the bona fideness of people who should be presenting. Okay, move on to 3. Kasmin yoge pravriteyam sthane vahena hetuna utaha sanchoditaha krishnaha kritavasamhitam.
In what period and at what place was this first begun? And why was this taken up? From where did Krishna Dvaipayan Vyasa, the great sage, get the inspiration to complete this literature?
So now they are digging deep into the background of Bhagavatam. Right? So if you trace, what was it? These sages assembled, they asked 6 questions, correct? And then Suta Goswami started answering. First, he talked about the chapter 2, which is basically the summation. He kind of gave a bit of a summary. It's like contents of Gita summarized.
Yeah.
That was contents of Bhagavatam summarized in chapter 2. And then he gave the different incarnations of Krishna, concluding by the most important incarnation for this yuga, which is Srimad Bhagavatam. So he concluded that. And now the sages are saying, oh, okay, Bhagavatam is the literary incarnation and it was compiled by Vyasadeva. So then you tell us, when was it done? Which place did it happen? Why was it compiled? And where did Vyasadeva get inspiration? Because they all know that Vyasadeva has compiled the whole Vedic literature. So why was there a need to compile Srimad Bhagavatam separately? Logical question, right?
Yes.
And sadhus are asking this question, not ignorant fools who have no idea about Vedic literature. So this question is even more valuable. So this is actually, there'll be 4 questions that will be asked in that section 1 to 13. So this is actually one question, but it has got subparts. So what period, what place, why, where? All the questions are asked. What, why, where? And then text 4 and 4, 5, and I think 7. 8. So from here, 4 to 8 basically is one section. So maybe, where are we on time? Yeah, we'll recite this section together, all the 4 verses, translation, and do this, because from 9 then it will move on to Parikshit. Okay. Tasya putro mahayogi samadhanvikalpakaha ekantamatiro guno guda iveyate. This is that long one. Sarvasajam. Drishtvanuyantam rishimat. No, this is Brahma Samhita. Chintamani prakarasadma sukalpa vriksha. Drishtvanuyantam rishimat
Devyo hiya padadesya chittam tadvikshati nau jagatavasi Sri Purvidhanatu Sutasya Viviktarashti
Katham alakshita paurai
samprapta kurujangalan
unmatta mukha jadava vicharan gajasavai katham va pandavityasya
Rajamunina saha Jatrisha Shruti Sakodohanamatramhi Grihishrohamedina Avekshate Mahabhaga Tirthom Purvastadashamam.
So we'll do the translation one by one. Number 4. Somebody who's not read so far.
His Vyasadev's son was a great devotee and equibalanced monist whose mind was always concentrated in monism. He was transcendental to mundane activities, but being unexposed, he appeared like an ignorant person.
Text 5.
While Sri Vyasadeva was following his son, beautiful young damsels who were bathing naked covered their bodies with cloth. Although Sri Vyasadeva himself was not naked, but they had not done so when his son had passed. The sage inquired about this, and the young ladies replied that his son was purified and when looking at them made no distinction between male and female, but the sage made such distinctions.
6.
How was he, Srila Sukadev, the son of Vyasa, recognized by the citizens when he entered the city of Hastinapur, now Delhi, after wandering in the provinces of Kuru and Jangala, appearing like a madman, dumb and retarded?
7.
How did it so? Sorry,
How did it so happen that King Parishit met this great sage, making it possible for this great transcendental essence of the Veda, Bhagavatam, to be sung to him?
He, Shukdev Goswami, was accustomed to stay with the door of a householder only long enough for a cow to be milked, and he did this just to satisfy the residents.
Sanctify. Correct. So we'll get back to 4. So here in this section, Suta Goswami specifically is talking about the speaker of Bhagavatam and his qualities. And of course, there are questions in between as well, but essentially that's that section. So in this particular verse, it will see some of the qualities of Shukadev Goswami. Who was he? So it is first said that Tasya Putro Mahayogi, that he was a Mahayogi. Of course, yogi here does not mean people in the yogic practice, but it is essentially him as a devotee. So he's a Mahayogi. And then Samadrik. So Samadrin, it is here. Nirvikalpaha, which basically means he's a equibalanced. Of course, he was a monist, means everything is one. And then we know how eventually he became a devotee. There's a nice story of how he grew up. As soon as he came out from the womb, he was actually a youth, a teenager. He became a teenager in the womb itself. And he came out of the womb. Yeah, is it 14 or 15 years old? Correct. And he came out of the womb just like that. So imagine a 14 or 15-year-old boy coming out of the womb, right? I mean, obviously he's not wearing anything, but he's a grown-up person, So we can't even imagine how that big person grows in the womb in the first place. For us, it's a wonder even how that baby from a little seed grows onto a baby to be able to come out of that aperture, in the body. It is just a miracle. Our Guru Maharaj says, if you want to really believe in God, you should know the process of childbirth, not from a medical perspective, but just how it actually happens. Just by understanding that process, your faith will become firm in God. So, even that is difficult. How can we imagine a 14, 15-year-old boy coming out of the womb? And then he comes out of the womb, stands up, and he runs away. I mean, he just runs away. Runs away from the house, from his parents, from his mother, father. He's just running. And then Vyasadeva had to send some of his disciples and tell them that you go and search for him, but don't tell him anything, because if you tell him to come back, he will not. He's left house for good. So when you see him or when you notice him from far, you just sing some of the verses from Bhagavatam that glorify Krishna's beauty. So these people, they were searching all over the forest, and when they found him sitting somewhere, from far they started reciting this verse. And Shukadeva Goswami, he heard this verse. When it hit his ears, he became so enchanted, because that verse was Barha Pidam, that verse is there. It describes the form of Krishna, how he's nicely dressed, he's got peacock feathers. And just by hearing this description, he became enchanted. And it is just like somebody, coming and giving you a little marijuana or a drug, those heavy drugs, that they give you a little bit, just that tiny bit. Oh, this is free. Just put it in your tongue, little bit. And you reluctantly do it. But as soon as it hits your tongue, what happens? Your body craves for more, right? And then they don't have to come to you. You will run to them to ask for more drugs. Correct? That's how this whole business works. So these people, the disciples, they sang about Krishna's glories. As soon as he heard, he became more thirsty and intoxicated to hear more. So he actually goes to the disciples and says, where did you learn this verse? It's so nice. It's so enchanting. I want to know more. So the disciples said that, well, we don't know anything. This is what we learned from our guru. But if you want, we can take you to our guru's place. So he said, yes, I want to go. I want to go. So Shukadeva Goswami followed the disciples of Vyasadeva. And the disciples eventually took Shukadeva Goswami back to his own house. And then he heard Bhagavatam from Vyasadeva.
His father.
And so initially, I mean, it's a technical point, but he was a so-called monist at the beginning. But when he heard Bhagavatam, when the literary incarnation of Krishna entered his ears, the whole thing was purified. Any tinge of any other philosophy, monism was destroyed. He was a complete devotee, pure devotee. And of course, we know his past as Shuka the parrot, right? So we'll not get into that story now. So he was Sukadeva Goswami. So this person, although he's a monist, he's to be understood from our perspective as a devotee. So that's second. Third is Ekanta Mati, whose mind is focused. Of course, initially in monism, but eventually in the glorification of Krishna through Srimad Bhagavatam. And then Gudo Mudha Ive Yate. So what is that? Mudha Ive Yate. So he was not very like he appeared like an ignorant person. He didn't know the ways of the world. So imagine a person who just born from the womb, how will he be exposed to the material world? So he was not exposed, means he was very innocent from that perspective. So these are, 4 qualities that have been highlighted here. Prabhupada here writes that he gives a good discrimination or point of difference between a conditioned soul and a liberated soul in this purport at the end. So Prabhupada writes that a conditioned soul and a liberated soul may apparently be on the same platform, but factually they are differently engaged and their attention is always alert, either in sense enjoyment or self-realization. So their activities are the same. Both are cooking, but one person is cooking and tasting from the kadai. Nice. If I serve it to that person, he'll also say nice. Same activity, same kadai, same everything. But a devotee, he's also cooking, But cooking what? With a consciousness. I hope I put the right masala. I hope the quantity is right. Krishna is going to eat. He's not an ordinary person. He must be satisfied. Let me put a little bit more. Let me be more attentive, and cooks. And then this person from the kadai only starts eating and maybe puts, there is no suchi muchi in terms of people who are in that space. Whereas a devotee, he nicely offers it to Krishna and then eats it. So the whole consciousness is poles apart, but the activity itself appears the same. So for a person who's not aware, there is no difference in the activity of a so-called a pure devotee of the Lord and a non-devotee. But it's all about their alertness in the right direction of self-realization or sense enjoyment. And then the next one talks about one very important aspect of that highlights the innocence. We just talked about innocence, right? In the last verse, the last part of the last verse. So this verse explains why he was innocent or how he was innocent by giving an example. So this also we have read this part of it in chapter 2. That Vyasadeva was following. He was running behind his son, right? When his son was running away from home, his father was running after him and crying out, "Oh, my son!" And there's a nice verse in chapter 2. Even the trees were crying and supporting Vyasadeva. So here, when this was happening, there were some girls who were bathing, and when they saw Vyasadeva, they became very shy and embarrassed and covered themselves. But first, when they saw Sukadeva Goswami going, they didn't cover. They were on their own. First, when Sukadeva Goswami ran, they didn't cover. They were, whatever they were doing, they were continued. But when they saw Vyasadeva, although Vyasadeva was fully clothed, right? Sukadeva Goswami was not wearing anything. He was, in our context, naked. A 14, 15-year-old boy naked means you can understand. But in spite of him being naked and running like that, the girls also did not cover themselves. But when Vyasadeva, who was the age of more than their father's age maybe, when he was running behind, wearing his normal dress, they felt shy and they covered themselves. Why is it? The sages inquired. And what was the answer? The lady said that he is so innocent and purified that when they looked at, he didn't even kind of look at the girls from that perspective anyway, as we understand. But for him, everybody is a living entity, part and parcel of Krishna. So he did not make a material covering distinction between a male and a female. He saw every living entity as a part and parcel of Krishna. And because of that experience, he did not have any discrimination that we have on a material level. Because of his purity, because of his level that he was at. So that is Sukadeva Goswami. So that's why he is considered, when we say innocent, it's also meaning purity. The purer we are, the more innocent we become. Just like the child, we say, the child is very innocent. It means what? The child is pure. The child does not have complex and complexities and all these vices. They're very clear, very pure. So sattva. And then the next part is so if the person is so innocent, but he's not wearing anything, how will somebody recognize the greatness of such a devotee? Because imagine if somebody like that, was to come in front of us, would we tell him to come and give Bhagavatam? I mean, I'm not comparing Sukadeva Goswami, but I'm just saying from understanding it from a material conception. You see, so he was just without clothes running away and he was just wandering. So the sages suddenly thought, excuse me, how was he recognized by the citizens of Hastinapur? Because he was appearing like a madman, no? We also have another instance in Bhagavatam where another person was roaming like this. Can anybody recollect?
Jadabharat.
Jadabharat. Yes. Yes. Rishabh as well, towards the end of his life. Yes, you're right, Mataji. So he was completely, he was appearing like a madman to others because he was totally absorbed in his meditation and devotion to the Lord. So they said that, but how do they know? So Prabhupada in the purport writes that it is not important how a sage looks, but what is important is how a sage speaks. We should be interested in hearing a sage, not at looking at a sage. Very important. And then the next verse talks about, so if Sukadev Goswami was like this, how did people know that he is a sage of that stature, a pure devotee? Then the next question is a follow-up of that. So here it is, here they're asking, how did Parikshit Maharaj, who's the king of Hastinapur, right? So even if the citizens are not aware, how will the king be aware that this is a pure devotee of the Lord? So how was it possible that this Sukadev Goswami actually narrated Bhagavatam to the king of Hastinapur? How is it? And then the last part. So here it is said, the last quality of Sukadev Goswami, that he was accustomed to stay at the door of a householder only long enough for a cow to be milked. And he did this to sanctify the residence. These two are important qualities of a sannyasi. A sannyasi who's given everything up for the sake of Krishna, not for the sake of giving things up. That is false renunciation. People who have given everything up, why? Because they want to devote all their time, energy, mind, body, words in only serving Krishna and his mission. So two things are important. One is they don't stay in any place permanently. Like we all want permanent residence, right?
Yeah.
Sannyasis who does not want permanent residence.
Yes.
And what is permanent? The time frame of staying in one place is given here. They will only stay at a place which is long enough. The time that they will stay in a place is only long enough that it takes for a cow to be milked. How long does it take for a cow to be milked? We haven't milked a cow, so we don't know.
10, 15 minutes. Depend upon how it gives the milk.
Depend on the cow.
Depend on the cow. How much?
So only for that time period, they will stay in one place, then they will go somewhere else. And if we hear from the Goswamis also, the 6 Goswamis, that they never slept under the shade of one tree more than a day. So they'll sleep here, then they'll sleep somewhere else. Why? Because even by sleeping under a tree in the same way for every day, you will become attached to that place under the tree. And we get worried, oh, I'm attached to my house, to my, my surroundings, whatever it is. Of course we get attached because we are there. So the sannyasi means renunciation not only in terms of other possessions, even the way they stay, even the way they eat, they conduct their life, everything is in the mood of renunciation. And another important aspect is they go to different householders' houses. Why?
To sanctify.
So that's why our tradition, the Vedic tradition, is to invite sannyasis to your house. Why? So that they can sanctify your residence. Not that the sannyasi comes to beg and goes away. So the sannyasi's job is to give. And the grihastha's job is also to give donation, give foodstuffs to the sannyasi for his maintenance. Both are important. But the sannyasi should not feel that because I'm a sannyasi, I don't have to give anything. They are giving me money, they are giving me food, I just take it and I go away. That's it. That is wrong. And the householder should also not think that the sannyasi is only coming to beg. It is his duty to feed them. So these two things are very important, that whenever sannyasis come or we have an opportunity to call them to our place, not only sannyasis, even senior devotees. That's why we all are very excited when we want to do a program. There's so many devotees who can come to our place. A senior devotee will come and do Krishna Katha. Other devotees will come and put their feet in our house, and our house will become sanctified. That is the purpose. It's not a social gathering. It is a place. It is an activity that actually purifies the whole thing, our whole place. So that's why it is very important that we have to constantly keep sanctifying. So Prabhupada in the purport writes, we said 15-20 minutes. Prabhupada says half an hour. So by asking for some alms, Prabhupada writes, the householder should be, such asking for alms from the householder should be for the purpose of sanctifying his home. One who is in the renounced order of life should not be allured by the glamour of the household's worldly possession and thus become subservient to worldly men, which unfortunately people who are not in the right sampradaya, they have degraded into that. And that's why people's faith in sannyasis has gone down. So it is upon us to re-establish this mood, this spirit, this philosophy, and spread this message right across the world. And to do that, we have to understand the greatness and the qualities of Sukadeva Goswami as it is mentioned here. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Okay, thank you very much. Anybody has any questions? Sorry, we went a bit over time today.
Surit Prabhu ki jai.
Prabhupada ki jai.
Prabhupada ki jai, Gurudev ki jai, Sri Krishna Prabhu ki jai.
So,
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you so much. It is very relishing to hear Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yes, it is. That's why it is Purana Mamalam.
Yeah.
It is like that. It's Ras. And when we hear the Ras from Prabhupada and his representatives, it becomes even relishable. We will read that verse where it says Bhagavatam is relishable, but when you get it from Shukadev Goswami, it's even more relishable. Because he's like the parrot who is pecking into the mango. Like the ripe mango is very tasty, but when you have a parrot having a small peck, that makes it even more tasty.
More tasty.
Yeah.
Yes. And then when we hear from Prabhupada, it becomes even tastier. Yeah, that is the greatness of Bhagavatam. So I'm sure all of you are reading nicely.
Thank you so much.
Prabhu, I have one question if you have time.
Yes, no problem.
Yeah, just you were telling about that, that Krishna is in Vrindavan or is not in Vrindavan. Yeah, I mean it's we can connect with the Achinta Bhedabhed Tattva, personalism, impersonalism.
Correct.
Achha, that Achinta Bhedabhed Tattva, how it's begun, means it's from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, right?
No, the tattva is already there. He put it forward to us as a philosophy for us, for our understanding. So the Krishna's philosophy, Krishna's activities, they are eternal. They are existing. But it is not for ordinary people to understand them. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came, Krishna came as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to present that philosophy in an easy to understandable way. Because even amongst the spiritualists, there are 6 paths. Like your Guru Maharaj has given a very nice seminar on all those 6 paths of spirituality. There's Dvaitavad, there's Advaitavad, there's many other things. But if anybody who follows any of this process does not get a complete understanding. It's just like understanding Brahman or Paramatma. It is not really wrong, but it is not complete. So when it is not complete, what happens? You feel incompleteness, right? You don't feel satisfied. Just like Vyasadeva, he compiled all of these things. So it had Dvaitavad, that had Advaitavad, that had, Nirvikar, everything is there. In Veda, there is Nirvikarvadi also, right? Formless. It is there. So Veda Vyas did everything, but after doing all of that, he is not happy, he is not satisfied. Why? Because he did not glorify or mention clearly the ultimate understanding of that philosophy, of the science of God. So same thing, people at that point, they could not correctly understand the science of Krishna. And it was lost the way it was. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu specifically came and he took the essential elements from all the 4 sampradayas, right? All the 4 sampradayas. And he put together a a consolidated philosophy that he named as Achintya Bheda Bhed Tattva. So it is simultaneously one. So we are simultaneously one with Krishna in terms of the quality, but we are also different from Krishna in terms of
the quantity.
And that makes perfect sense, because any question, any philosophical statement that we read, if we understand that from this context, then it makes perfect sense. You know, it's just like the puzzle pieces, they join together. In other forms of philosophical understanding, some, you know, you might join a few pieces, but everything will not join. There'll always be some doubts, some questions. But this philosophy, everything gets joined. And as part of that understanding, we know that Krishna is there everywhere. So he can simultaneously be there at many places. Like he was there during the Rasa dance.
Yeah.
Right? And he never leaves Vrindavan. Even today, he's performing the pastimes with Radharani every day. Now, people who are not in that consciousness or with that knowledge or realization, they will not believe. But devotees, even now, they know, Nidhivan and all those pastimes that we hear, it is still happening. And that doesn't mean Krishna is not there elsewhere. He's there everywhere. So one way to understand that is, if Krishna can be in Vrindavan even today, he can be in the temples. All the temples have Krishna, right?
Yeah.
Who are we praying to?
Krishna.
We're not praying to his murti. We are praying to Krishna. That is Krishna. And he's got so many forms. In ISKCON itself, there are 650 or more temples all over the world. That is only on earth. What about other planets?
Yeah.
Where also Krishna is being worshipped. Right? So he's there everywhere. And he's also there within us as Paramatma. So it's into the science that, your Krishna is there in so many forms. So if he can be there as his Archa Vigraha, he can be there as Paramatma, he can be there in his original transcendental form. He can also be there in the form of his literary incarnation, Bhagavatam. So Achintya, this is Achintya. We can't, in material senses, we can't understand. We just have to take the statement, and as we practice our sadhana and we come to that level of purification and realization, we will actually realize this is not something we can understand. This is something we have to realize. Right? Like, we don't have to understand that this person is my father and mother. We don't have to understand. We realize, we know, this is it. That's it. Finished. My father, my father. Now, whether they are like this or like that, it doesn't matter. We have realized this is my father, this is my mother. Finish. I don't have to prove to anybody. I know it very well. I realize it. So same thing is with Krishna. Krishna, devotees, they realize Krishna. So when you come to the level of realization, it doesn't mean we should not have knowledge or scientific understanding. But the scientific understanding should lead us to the level of realization. Then the connection becomes pakka. Just like the parents and child, that relationship is pakka. You can't, there is no, ambiguity, or there is no motivation in that relationship. Most of the times, not in today's context maybe, but that's how we see it. So same thing is between the Lord and his devotee. It's a pakka realization. So all the Lord is telling us through these processes is to establish that connection. And once we feel connected, what happens? It's just like the child holding the hand of Krishna or the father. So the child is crossing the road, maybe 4 or 5-year-old boy crossing the main, even highway, 4-lane highway, 5-lane highway. So when the child stands on his own, he's so afraid. But when the child holds the finger of his father, then the child becomes lion, sher. Why? As soon as the father goes, he doesn't think, father, should you go or no? Father goes, he goes. He's got the confidence. So similarly, we are in this material world, and in the material world in front of us is like the 5-lane highway. My God, I put my den with, will a truck come or will a car come? At what speed it will come? We are so, so confused, so afraid. But as soon as we've got Krishna in the form of the holy name, in the form of this knowledge in Bhagavatam, it gives us the confidence. Then we say, it doesn't matter 5-lane, 6-lane, even 10-lane, okay, no problem. I will cross. because I've got Krishna with me. But that faith, that amount of faith only can be developed in the association of devotees. As we read in chapter 2, Bhagavad Gita. Faith can only be developed in association. And that's why Prabhupada wanted us to have these sessions, every day Bhagavatam, as often as possible association with devotees and hearing Krishna Katha. This is our immunity. We had that verse last time. Immunity from the cycle of birth and death. This is our immunity. So the more we understand Achintya, the more we become immune. And the more realization we get. Okay, long answer to your small question.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.